applied for our visas, but we were, well, I mean, it hasn't come through yet. We're expecting it to come through, so we're planning a trip in January.
Qasim Suleiman, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to begin by asking you how you're feeling about this moment. You haven't seen your father for some time. I'm assuming you haven't spoken to him for some time. Just what's been weighing on your mind at this quite difficult time for you and your family?
I mean, it's quite easy to feel quite helpless recently. I mean, we can't do that much. A lot of the efforts we've made have been in vain, or they've in fact kind of made things worse on that end. So when it comes to Pakistan, it's easy to just kind of feel helpless and quite far away from everything. But at the same time, you know, right now, because things are so bad, we're somewhat desperate. So we'll do whatever. That's why kind of, you know, we're here.
When you say it's gotten worse, what do you mean? Every time you speak up about it, what happens?
So when we spoke up last time, I remember there was a period where, in fact, after the Maran Naufal interview, the first one we did, there was a long stretch where we didn't speak to him. I think it was about 3 months. The next time we spoke to him was just after a different interview, and then it then went 4 months since we spoke to him again. And I think they basically wanted to say, oh, look, we're allowing him conversation, but straight after that, you know, with us, which the court orders, but they never really adhere to. Straight after that, then they go back on the blackout, and now it's the worst blackout it's ever been for him. I mean, he's completely isolated. We heard today they don't even allow the guards to communicate with him. It's all kind of psychological torture tactics, and it's got so bad where I think he had something like, it was like 20 minutes outside, outdoors a day or something like that, and as well as that, you know, no contact with family, no contact with personal physicians or anything like that. So they use all of these different tactics to try and completely isolate him. No books, that's a brutal one for him. So yeah, all of these different tactics they use just to try and break him, but he's very tough to break.
Yeah, and especially since on Friday, a spokesperson from the army held a press conference essentially announcing that he's now officially in full isolation. But since the last visit that he got from his family, which was the first one he'd had for a whole month, he wasn't allowed to any visits for the whole of November. And according to international law, any over 15 days of solitary confinement is considered psychological torture. And yeah, since that press conference, he's essentially been officially put in isolation. And not just that, he was labelled mentally ill, delusional, and a national security threat. So that's all pretty stressful for us and kind of made us want to contribute more.
This defence minister, by the way, was lying through his teeth through the interview. I'll openly say it, because he was saying we had regular contact with our father. He was like, "Oh, come, they can come and visit." They'd said earlier that we get arrested if we go over there. So it's just filled with contradictions. They in the interview contradict themselves, saying that you know, India controlling his Twitter, and then he says, "Oh, but you know, he has Twitter access from his cell." So he's just. If you have any common sense, you can see the man's just lying through his teeth. They're the scum of the earth, these people. They're the lowest of the low. So another thing that frustrates me while I'm on it is the comparisons people draw between our father and other politicians who have also been to jail. They say, oh, these Pakistani politicians, they're always in and out of jail. They're in jail for about 3 months at max. Then they take a deal, they have no integrity, they take a deal, they go to England, a few years later the army says you can come back, and then they're suddenly back in power or around power. He's been in a solitary confinement cell for over 2 years where he's had filthy water, he's around inmates who are dying of hepatitis, the conditions are disgusting, and also he's completely isolated from any human contact. Anyone who was corruptible would take any of these deals that they've offered him, coming to England or, you know, going into house arrest. He is these comparisons with these other politicians are laughable. He would never take a deal and leave all of his other party members in jail to die and fester in these jails, and instead he stays in those conditions. He's happy to rot if it means that he can move towards his goal of ridding Pakistan of corruption, a goal that he has stated to us a million times. So the comparisons are infuriating, to be honest.
I want to ask a little bit more about his conditions in prison. You spoke a little bit about what it's like inside, but what do you know about how he's coping in there, solitary confinement? If you can describe to us what that's like inside there and how he's doing. I mean, he's a 73-year-old man as well.
Who's been shot 3 times in the past few years. He, as well as that, I mean, I said that the water's filthy, the food's nowhere near up to scratch. The only doctors he sees are these kind of military doctors. He's not able to see personal physicians or anything like that. And then also, yeah, what I said about daylight. I mean, he's inside a cell for 23 hours. I think he gets max an hour, if that. I think he was getting around 20 minutes recently. So the conditions are awful. They're not bad. They're awful. It's
it's been described as a death cell, the cell that he's in, because I think inmates who have been put on death row have been put in these small cells before with barely any light. Sometimes the electricity's been cut off. Dirty water, as Carson was saying, and just completely substandard conditions that don't meet international law for any sort of prisoner.
So what went through your minds when you saw the images of him that were circulating on social media, that perhaps he'd died or he'd been killed? There were all sorts of rumours swirling because, of course, there was no family contact, even though every Tuesday family members, based on the court, are supposed to see him and make contact with him, and they hadn't for several weeks.
Yeah, incredibly stressful, obviously. Yeah, I went straight onto kind of my family group chat, because that's the only reliable source that we have on the ground in Pakistan, but even they couldn't really answer us, because they tried to reassure us by saying I'm sure they won't touch him, but they couldn't confirm anything because no one was allowed to see him for the whole month of November. So it was only a couple of weeks ago that one of my aunts was allowed to go and see him, and then since then it's been this almost official isolation that's been announced. So,
and I mean, for us, it's like I always say, like, we kind of compartmentalize quite effectively, because you have to do that if you can't constantly think that your father's in a solitary confinement cell getting tortured. But I remember it's just you go on Twitter and suddenly you see just Imran Khan dead, his body being transferred to this. It's like, it's obviously very jarring, and it obviously pulls you out of whatever you're trying to do in your normal life, especially how helpless we are over here, not able to do much at all. So it's not ideal at all.
And what did your aunt say about seeing him after that period, when that started to generate a lot of headlines and the international media got involved, the international community got involved? Suddenly she was allowed to see him again. What did she say about how he was?
She reassured us that he was well, and yeah, he seemed healthy and well, but he was furious about the conditions he's being kept in, and he dictated a tweet, I think through her, or maybe, potentially through her, and I think that tweet has partly led to this reaction from the establishment to completely try and isolate him now.
Yeah.
I also wonder, you talked about the fact that, you guys have been warned not to come, even though the Defence Minister said you're welcome to come and you can visit him. Have you guys tried? Have you tried to engage with the Pakistani government to allow you to go and see your father?
Yeah, we're now planning, because they said it openly, so unless they go against their word again, then we should be hopefully going in January. We applied for our visas, but we were, it hasn't come through yet. We're expecting it to come through, so we're planning a trip in January.
And do you guys miss Pakistan? Going there and spending time?
Loads. The whole time. The mountains was our favourite. As in, we'd go up to the mountains, we'd drive about 6 hours up from Islamabad up into the mountains, and then we'd go on these long 7-hour walks up to this place in Nathioglu, and we would, it's like the most beautiful place you can imagine, with kind of, it reminds me of when you watch King Kong, that Skull Island where you have all of these massive insects. There were slugs this
Oh
big.
my
There were
gosh.
these wasps that didn't sting you with these big snakes. The whole thing, it's like a kind of fairy tale land. It's my favourite place, and we haven't been able to go up there in years. In about 7 years,
Wow.
we would go at least once a year, if not more.
And if you do see him, what are you likely to say? I mean, you talk about the, corrupt Pakistani politicians cutting deals. Do you think that you would say, look, you've spent this time in prison, you've done your time, perhaps look at cutting a deal?
No, never, never, because he. What you have to understand is we grew up with him going in, head first into these kind of dangerous situations, and it's hard to understand why we would, be okay with it. But it's his life. It's literally his passion and his goal. He calls it his life purpose, is to, help Pakistan rid it of corruption, rid it of these crooks who are currently running it and driving it into the ground. And so if he just took a deal and came over to us and lived in England, I know there would be this kind of this burning desire and this aching that he's has left his country for dead, and he'd be depressed, to be honest. I know he would. And so from a young age, I realized it from a young age that this is his goal, and we, as much as we'd love to have our father watching all of our kind of cricket matches or football matches over here, he has a purpose which is far greater. So you can only respect it.
And I want to ask about that. I mean, growing up, what was he like as a father? As you say, this was his purpose, but what was his relationship like with you guys? I mean, what are some of the things, the words of wisdom that a father passes on to children? For you guys to be as stoic as you are, as painful as all of this must be, to understand what his greater purpose has been.
So I mean, so much. So obviously we would play cricket either in Pakistan. He taught us, how to play cricket. How to, he was very present. We were with him a lot of our lives. Every holiday we would go to Pakistan, and then, half terms and things. Sometimes he would come over here, and this is where he would perch up. This is our grandmother's house on our mother's side, and it was somewhat normal dynamic, except he would, he'd love to kind of preach anything. So it would be rule of law or kind of, how a government should be run. I'll be honest, I used to, when I was a bit younger, would zone out a little bit. It wasn't my kind of favourite point of, a topic, and I prefer to kind of watch something interesting. Whereas Suleiman and him would be in these long debates about politics, religion, and he would love it. But he is a natural lecturer, so millions of lessons. But that's what makes it all the more frustrating when people call him corrupt, because why would he be preaching this kind of stuff to a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old who don't even understand what corruption means, or we did, but why would you preach that to someone at such a young age if it wasn't your passion, if it wasn't everything? It wasn't everything that he stood for.
What were some of those heated discussions and debates? What were the kind of questions that you would ask?
Well, yeah, I think it was usually sort of, I was coming from a perspective of growing up in the West, and just like Western values, I suppose, again, versus, I was kind of slightly playing devil's advocate sometimes, but just Western values versus maybe the values of a more conservative Islamic country. And we just have like quite civil debates, and just to help me learn about politics and life in general. Faith as well. That's probably the thing he's most wanted to impress on us growing up. Every time we speak to him on the phone since he's been in prison, that's what he wants to speak about the most. once sometimes we don't even get to ask him how he is, because he'll just quickly say, "Oh, I'm fine, don't worry about me, but here's the lesson that I want to teach you about such and such." But
when was the last time that you spoke to him?
I mean, Suleiman hasn't spoken to him in nearly 5 months, around 5 months, since July. I was able to get 5 minutes in before they cut it off about 4 months ago, because I dared bring up the topic of whether we'd be able to get him out of prison, like some basic conversation on strategy, and it just got cut off before Suleiman could even join the call. So we don't speak to him at all. But one of the first things you asked earlier, kind of what we'd speak to him about, one of the first things, if it's not the first question, it's the second question, was always, how is your grandmother, whose house it is here, who he loved, tweeted that he loved her like a mother. We haven't spoken to him since she died only a couple of months ago, and I would love to speak to him about that. He called her his mother after his own mother had passed, and their relationship was so close. So I'd love to speak to him about that. This is actually where he would sit. We would always be here every time, and it would be our grandmother on that side, our father on this side, and then me and Suleiman would just listen as they would just make each other laugh more than I would ever see him laugh. And because she was quite ridiculous. And yeah, so the memories of that are quite sad now, because obviously the positions of both of them, but it feels a bit like an empty vessel, this house.
Yeah.
But it's good to be back.
What else would you say to him? I mean, if you could send him a message now through this, what would you say to him?
I mean, at this point, it's hard not to speak, just to get desperate. I want to know how we can get him out, how we can help, because the main point is we feel so helpless at this point. But we're not allowed to speak about that, obviously. So we would, avoid the elephant in the room. And I mean, there's so much to catch up on. What we've been doing in the past 6 months, how is life with us? And he refuses always to talk about his conditions. He's like, "Oh, don't worry about me. How's everything?" He wants to just kind of absorb as much about what we're doing as possible. So he has something to think about when he's in there. Doesn't want to dwell on, his situation.
Was he critical of how you guys played cricket?
he was actually quite polite.
Yeah, he really wasn't. No, he wasn't at all, actually. No, he said, you either have the kind of passion to be professional, and then he would push us, or if we didn't want to be, then play it for fun and enjoyment. And I think he realised it was probably the latter.
That's from a charity match where me and my father actually got to bat together in a partnership. And we're about to fist bump there in the second picture, I think.
It's a good shot.
It is a really good shot.
Yeah.
And how did he rate you? He was gentle.
I think he was quite impressed that day, but no, he wasn't pushy at all with us.
I think he hit a 4 there, about 8 years old.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
A late cut.
But he talked about that partnership a lot growing up.
There's a great
such a nice
scorecard.
moment.
Yeah, there's a great
that was a good
scorecard
scorecard.
where you have both of their names, S Khan, I Khan, and then me. I think I got out on a duck.
Oh no,
Never a great batsman.
not that interested in
No, I struggled batting. And we're now we've gone from, maybe back then we did love it, but not to the degree that we would play it professionally. Now we're both kind of obsessed. So we play every year quite a lot. So I'd like to see, he hasn't seen me bowl or him bat in a decade or something, less maybe, about 5-6 years.
You talked about feeling helpless. I mean, what do you want the international community to do now? What would you like to tell global leaders, people like Donald Trump, for example? You were both in the US recently, and we've seen the evolving relationship between Pakistan and the Trump administration. What would you want to say?
I think at minimum just to make sure that the standards of international human rights are being upheld, and right now they're clearly being violated. And democracy in Pakistan, to see how it's deteriorating, and yeah, and essentially we just want to ensure that the basic human rights for our father are being respected, and
just implement the court orders, respect the court orders, and respect the rule of law, really, and allow him to see his personal position. That's massive, obviously. Allow, basic human rights. It's those three things.
And also, if possible, independent monitoring of his conditions, because we have no idea what it's like until someone goes to see him and speaks to him. So,
I spoke to a representative of the Pakistani government who said to me, we don't have control over what the jail does and the jail staff and the treatment, and also brought up the 200 plus cases of corruption against him and various other cases. How do you react when you hear that from the Pakistani government?
I mean, they're all crooks. They are the lowest of the low. They'll do whatever it takes, whether it's torture, whether it's disrespecting democracy and rigging an election. They'll take any sort of deal. And as you see with Donald Trump, they elected him as for the Nobel Peace Prize. They'll do whatever it takes to stay in power for wealth and for control. It's the current government and the army they're laughable, and it's very, very clear to see how corrupt they are if you do the slightest digging. So there's not much you can say other than they're just it's a crooked system run by crooked people.
Yeah, it's not even digging really. It's the international. I think the international media it's been pretty widely reported that the previous elections in February 2024 were rigged. Their mandate, it's not PTI's mandate was essentially stolen.
The UN.
Everyone knows who the most popular leader in the country is. And
the UN, Amnesty International have all called it an arbitrary detainment. It's right there in front of us. Yeah, as someone said, it's not digging. It's just reading any of the articles. So yeah.
And I'll get to the UN Special Rapporteur's latest report in a moment, but I want to ask a little bit more about the fact that the army chief, Asim Munir, they changed the constitution. He's given himself a lifetime amnesty and, immunity. I just wonder, Imran Khan, if he becomes aware of all of these changes, and he may be aware, it's hard to know, what he would be thinking about all of these shifts and changes that we're seeing now in Pakistani politics.
I don't think he'd be surprised at all, because I think it's quite clear that it was heading towards basically what it is now, which is a military dictatorship in everything but name. So I think he probably knows about this already, and part of the reason he's being silenced and isolated is because they know that he's inevitably not going to stand for this and going to kick up a fuss about these amendments. The country is just obviously sliding towards a military dictatorship. So, I don't think he'd be surprised at all.
Do you think he'll ever get out?
It's getting harder to see a route out at this point. We try and have faith, but at the same time, right now the conditions are getting worse. The people in power are becoming more entrenched, as you say. So it's very hard to see a way out, and a lot of the people we speak to, the kind of advisors, are seeming less and less confident every time we speak to them. So we're now worried we might never see him again. It's good to see this defense minister say, "Oh, welcome, come," because now we actually, we have that recorded. We can go over there and hopefully we can see him. But I still have my doubts.
And also the fact that he's not the sort of person who's going to make any compromises or cut a deal. So, at the moment that looks like the only easy route out. But I think international pressure is always an effective way of forcing change in these situations.
I wonder on messages, I mean, what you would say firstly to the Pakistani government, and what would you say to the Pakistani people? Because, you know, many say that they are too held hostage by corrupt governments and these authoritarians who are changing their constitution, and it's going down a slippery slope of authoritarianism.
I would say to keep the faith and to keep making noise, even though the government and the establishment are trying to scare them into silence as much as possible. Peacefully protest if you can, and just don't allow yourself to be sort of browbeaten by this essentially dictatorship now.
I've spoken to your aunt as well, Imran Khan, and she talked about the fact that she isn't able to see her brother, but the treatment of his sisters has also been quite horrendous, where they've been left outside the prison. They haven't been allowed in. You know, they try and go every Tuesday. What are they saying to you guys about, you know, the treatment that they're getting?
I think one of our aunts was manhandled a few weeks ago when she tried to go to see our father on one of the Tuesdays that they're mandated to see him. They're never really allowed. It's once every now and again they're allowed in. And it's never usually all of them.
It's one random one, at any time.
So,
and I mean, you say manhandled. One was dragged through the streets by their hair. They were sprayed with water cannons recently. That's the most recent one. So, and these are kind of, you know, they're not kind of young women. That these are my aunties who are being kind of brutally treated. So they're not beyond any kind of depravity.
As you say, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of how much you can do in terms of your activism. You have lobbied the UN, and the Special Rapporteur has put out a very strong statement condemning his solitary confinement and saying it's against international law. What next for you guys in terms of what you do, you know, along these lines to try and get the word out there?
I think more media like this to spread the word, and also we're looking to do more advocacy, to do trips maybe to Brussels or Geneva in January, to speak to politicians and officials about this situation, and just get the bare minimum goals, which are basic human rights, to try and make sure those are upheld.
And I guess finally, you know, you talk about when you were little, 4 and 6, the conversations that your father had with you. As you were growing up, did you think you would ever be in this position, lobbying for his release from prison? Because, of course, the path that he was going down was always a dangerous path, you know, going into... There has been no leader of the country, a Prime Minister of Pakistan, who hasn't spent time in prison since the creation of the state. It's always been that murky relationship between civilian government and the military and the intelligence agencies of the country. Did you think that you would be faced with this day?
Yes, probably, realistically, because we spent, you know, he especially, my brother, spent a lot of time asking him not to go into politics when there were kind of these dangerous characters killing people consistently. Except there's one really important thing that I want to clarify on that. You know, everyone says, oh, you know, all of these Pakistani politicians, they go to prison. This is just completely different. They're not all tortured in solitary confinement cells and staying there for, you know, upwards of 2 years. It's a completely unique situation, and it's the first time someone with integrity has been put in prison.
What do you think they're afraid of?
Popularity, yeah.
Yeah. He's the most popular person in the country by a landslide. So the moment he's out, you know, there's no chance they'll hold on to power. So they're desperately clinging on to it, however they can.
Qasim, Suleiman, thank you both for joining me.
Thanks so
Appreciate it.
much.
Thanks,
Alex.
Yalda.
Thank you.